The new year just started, and while that should feel like a reset, I know that many of you are feeling tired. And maybe you're feeling tired because you tried a lot of things last year to fix what feels broken, right? Maybe you've implemented new communication strategies. Maybe you've built some processes or reset some unclear expectations just based off of some tips that you picked up from reading books, watching videos, or straight from AI itself. And yet, I'm betting that even with all that information, that you're still walking into this year feeling exactly the same, burnt out and already dreading that much needed conversation with that team member that just doesn't seem to get it. Does that sound like you? Friend, I am so sorry that this is how you are entering into this new year. I know how depleting that can feel. But here's what I want you to know. The problem isn't the effort that you're putting in, because I know you're putting in the effort. I mean, you're here, right? Giving me your time and watching this video today because clearly you care. So it is not the lack of effort that's causing this constant depletion. You know, after coaching hundreds of managers through these exact same struggles, I can tell you that the ones who break through to the other side are working hard, yes, but they're not white knuckling their way to successful outcomes. What they're doing is making 3 specific decisions very differently. And here's what's great about these decisions. They aren't personality overhauls or massive time commitments. They're just simple little shifts that compound over time. And the best part is that you can start making these shifts today. So that's why in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 3 decisions that will either keep you stuck in this exhausting cycle that you're in, or finally give you the breakthrough that you've been working so hard towards. So let's start with the first decision, okay? And I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever looked at other leaders in your organization, or maybe even your manager if you have a good one, and thought to yourself, well, man, if I can only be just like them, I'd be more successful. Or maybe you've told yourself that you just need to be more charismatic, more outgoing, more likable, and that will make you the leader that's respected and trustworthy. Listen, if any of that has crossed your mind, I want you to know I get it. I mean, when you're new to leadership, we tend to look around to try to figure out what successful leadership looks like, right? And what we see in that kind of success bubble often looks like people who seem, naturally confident, or who command a room with some sort of warmth, or who never seem unsure. So of course, we try to become that, right? We try to change who we are to kind of fit that picture that we have in our heads of what a leader should be. But here's why that keeps you stuck. You're actually competing with a version of leadership that doesn't actually predict success. After promoting managers myself, and then, like I said, coaching hundreds more, I've seen the same traits show up consistently in the most successful managers. And none of them are about being the most charismatic person in the room or even having, unshakable confidence, okay? The traits that actually predict success are the stuff that's under the surface. I often refer to it as the stuff that's under the iceberg, right? So what you're seeing is what's above the water. But what informs success is what's underneath the water. So what are these traits that I'm referring to that's underneath the water? Well, first there is resilience, okay? Successful leaders have this great ability to bounce back from the inevitable setbacks that come with managing people and, navigating organizational complexity. So it's not that they never feel defeated, right? It's not like they never have days like you. It's just that they're able to move forward when things do not go as planned. The next trait is that they operate with a team-first mindset, right? Meaning they are committed, to the overall success of the team rather than being concerned about who's getting credit for what, right? So instead of looking at everything with like a personal agenda and asking, well, how do I look good by doing this? They instead ask, what does my team need from me right now? They're also really good communicators, both in verbal and written communications, and they actively listen, meaning they are fully present in all interactions by seeking to understand, not react. Now, the beautiful thing about these traits, like I said earlier, is that these skills can be developed. I mean, I've had clients go from hesitant communicator to confident communicator, from overwhelmed to assertive and decisive, from struggling with imposter syndrome to now being recognized as one of the best managers on the team. So if they can do it, you can do it too. It is simply just a matter of making the decision that you're going to start building these traits. That being said, if you're not careful, you can actually build these traits or start, building these traits, but still find yourself exhausted and overwhelmed, which is why you actually have to protect these traits by making the next important decision. So let me ask you another question. Have you ever gotten to the end of your week week only to realize that you were busy the entire time, but actually didn't move anything forward? Like, you worked hard, you put in the hours, but when you look back on your week, you realize that you basically just dealt with fires and no proactive solutions. Yeah, I know that feeling so well. And if you are in that position right now, I want you to leave the word firefighter in the comment section below so I don't feel so alone. Anyways, my friend, here's what's really happening when you operate like this all the time, right? What's really happening is that you're essentially relying on sheer willpower to get through your day instead of systems. And if I know you as well as I think I do, which I think I do by now, I know you're innately a high achiever, a hard worker, so of course you think that's the right thing to do, which is just put your head down and get through the day. But what that causes is firefighting as a default, right? And you become somebody who's always reacting and never leading. Now, on the surface, that might feel okay for some time, but eventually it has significant consequence. Of course, we all know on the surface that that consequence is that you feel exhausted or like you feel like you're not giving your team what they need. But the bigger consequence is that you can't show up as the leader that you want to be. And as a result, you block yourself from the role satisfaction you crave. You block yourself from further promotions and recognition that you really deserve. And you end up sacrificing so much of your personal life for very little in return. So here's the big decisive shift that you got to make this year. You need to build simple, repeatable systems that actually free you up to lead. So let me give you just one specific system that you can start building out this week that'll make an impact this year. Okay, so start blocking 30 minutes every week for strategic thinking. Not email, not tasks, just thinking time, and protect it, right? Turn off all notifications, close your door, put it in a calendar as a meeting so no one books over it. And then during that time, what I want you to do is reflect back on the patterns you're seeing, right? Consider root causes and then implement systems so that you're not constantly reacting to the same problem over and over again. Now, these first two decisions, right? Building the right traits and then creating sustainable systems, they absolutely matter. But here's what I learned the hard way, right? They only work if you make this third decision. And for that, I want to go back into the Wayback Machine for a little bit and tell you a little bit of a story about my history. So when I first started managing people, y'all, I worked really, really hard. And I spent a lot of my personal time, probably too much of my personal time, if I'm being honest, researching and reading and implementing all the tips and approaches that I was, gleaning and reading about at the time. Now, if you would have asked me about this back then, I would have very much defended where I was spending my time. And I would have been very proud to tell you that I was being resourceful and working hard at trying to equip myself to be effective. Because from my vantage point, I was being proactive, right? I was seeking out the information that I thought was going to make me the manager I wanted to be. But what I later learned is that my resourcefulness was actually creating chaos. And that's because I was not clear on what I was doing or even the order with which I needed to do it. So let me give you an example of what I was doing so that you really understand. So essentially what I would do is I would implement a tip that I found from a book one day and then basically undo it the next week because I would watch a video where this guru would tell me that I should do this other thing that I resonated with. So I would implement the new tip which didn't align with the original tip that I read in the book. So essentially, I was constantly pivoting and showing up inconsistently. Looking back, it's so obvious that my team was impacted by it, right? I could tell that they were confused and not necessarily sure of what to expect from me. I probably would not have been able to name that at the time, but that subtext was definitely there. Now, I would like to sit here and tell you that I realized that I was being inconsistent on my own, but the truth is I did not realize this on my own. Instead, I got called out. So for those of you that know me, you know my story, right? That my boss had actually pulled me into his office one day and basically said, in nicer words, but essentially said, Mac, it's clear you don't know what you're doing and it's costing the company money. Yeah. Now, again, I'd like to sit here and tell you that I took it like a champ. And I did externally, but internally, y'all, I was so embarrassed. It was really humbling because it was at that point I realized that the people around me could clearly see what I was feeling inside. I mean, the whole reason, right, that I was constantly seeking out tips and tricks was because I knew inside that I lacked clarity as a leader. You know that feeling of like, I don't know something, but I don't know what that thing is. So I'm constantly looking for more information to fill that void that I kind of know that I have. That's how I felt throughout that entire first couple of months of being a manager, right? And it was really hard to realize that other people recognized that I didn't know what I was doing. That conversation with him, it really helped me to realize that effective leadership requires clarity. And that clarity can only come from guidance and structure, right? Not from grabbing random tips all over the place. Now, yes, as you become more experienced, clarity actually comes from action. But when you're inexperienced, clarity comes from guidance and structure. Because you can't build, for example, appropriate systems if you don't know what systems to build and in what order. Or you can't build trust if you don't know what traits or habits or approaches you should be implementing and in what order, or whether or not what you're dealing with in the first place is even a trust problem, right? You just can't do these things. So the decisive shift here is to get clear on what you're supposed to be doing, how to do it, and in what order. Now, the good news is you can absolutely get that clarity by following a proven framework instead of just chaotically implementing tips or sporadically trying new strategies. And that's exactly, y'all, why I built my program, the New Manager Accelerator, to give inexperienced and new managers a malleable framework that they can follow so that they can lead from clarity instead of just chaotically implementing tips, right, that they found off the internet. So if you are ready to stop the chaos, then a great first place to start is with my free training, How to Become an Effective Leader so that you can build a high-performance team. Because in this training, I'm going to walk you through my 5-step tried and tested framework that has helped hundreds of managers show up with effectiveness and lead high-performance teams. You can actually get registered for free using the link in the description box below.